Imagine trusting someone with your life only to have them stab you in the back. That's exactly what happened to Spain in the early 1800s. Napoleon Bonaparte, the guy who was supposed to be Spain's ally, turned out to be their worst nightmare. But why? And how did this betrayal change everything? Napoleon wasn't just some guy with a fancy hat and a hand in his jacket. He was a master strategist with a serious problem: Britain. They were giving him a massive headache, and he needed a way to beat them. That's when he came up with a plan so crazy, it just might work. Here's the deal. Napoleon decided to use Spain, his supposed ally, as a pawn in his game against Britain. He went to Spain and said, "Hey, let's team up and invade Portugal. They're buddies with Britain, so it'll be great." Spain fell for it hook, line, and sinker. They let Napoleon's troops march right through their country. Big mistake. But here's the thing. Napoleon wasn't really after Portugal. That was just a cover story. His real target? Spain itself. He wanted to take over the whole country without firing a single shot. Talk about ambitious. Napoleon's plan was pretty sneaky. First, he'd get his troops into Spain under the guise of invading Portugal. Then, once his army was in place, he'd take control of Spain from the inside. No messy battles, no long sieges, just a quick, clean takeover. But why Spain? Well, Napoleon saw it as a weak link. The Spanish monarchy was a mess, with a weak king and a corrupt government. Napoleon figured the Spanish people would be glad to see him take charge. He thought they'd welcome his brother Joseph as their new king with open arms. Napoleon was playing a dangerous game of political chess. He was moving his pieces into place, ready to checkmate Spain before they even realized they were in danger. It was a bold move, even for Napoleon. But here's where things get really interesting. Napoleon's plan hinged on one big assumption, that the Spanish people would just roll over and accept his rule. He thought they'd be so fed up with their own government that they'd welcome a French takeover. Napoleon was about to learn a hard lesson. Sometimes, even the smartest plans can blow up in your face, and for Napoleon, that's exactly what was about to happen. You see, Napoleon had made a classic mistake. He'd underestimated the Spanish people. He thought they'd be pushovers, easy to conquer and control. But he was dead wrong. The Spanish had a fierce national pride and a deep hatred of foreign invaders. They weren't about to let some French emperor waltz in and take over their country. Napoleon's plan was unfolding like a perfectly choreographed dance. French troops were all over Spain, but nobody suspected a thing. They were allies after all. Why would anyone question their presence? But as more and more soldiers poured in, the Spanish started to feel uneasy. Something wasn't right. Then, out of nowhere, Napoleon made his move. He forced King Charles IV of Spain to step down. Just like that, the king was gone. But Napoleon wasn't done. He had Ferdinand VII, the king's son, give up the throne too. In one swift move, Napoleon had left Spain without a ruler. You might think Napoleon would just take the crown for himself. I mean, why not? He was already running most of Europe. But nope, he had an even crazier idea up his sleeve. Instead of taking the throne, Napoleon put his own brother Joseph Bonaparte on it. Talk about keeping it in the family. The Spanish people were shocked. This wasn't just some political game. It was a massive insult to their entire country. Imagine waking up one day and finding out your neighbor's brother is now in charge of your house. That's basically what happened to Spain. Napoleon thought he was being clever. He figured the Spanish would just accept Joseph as their new king, but he couldn't have been more wrong. The Spanish weren't about to roll over and let some French emperor's brother rule them. Napoleon had seriously underestimated their pride and their love for their country. This betrayal wasn't just about taking power, it was about humiliating Spain. Napoleon wasn't content with just conquering the country. He had to rub salt in the wound by replacing their royal family with his own brother. It was like he was saying, "I don't even need to rule you myself, I'll just put my little brother in charge." The Spanish people were furious. This wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a direct attack on their identity, their culture, and their independence. Napoleon had crossed a line and the Spanish weren't about to forget it. What Napoleon didn't realize was that he'd just lit the fuse on a powder keg of Spanish anger. He thought he was being smart, but he'd actually made the biggest mistake of his career. The Spanish people were about to show him just how wrong he was. Napoleon's plan to control Spain without firing a shot had backfired spectacularly. Instead of a quick and easy takeover, He'd sparked a fire of resistance that would burn for years. The Spanish people were ready to fight back, and they were going to make Napoleon regret ever setting foot in their country. Napoleon thought he'd crushed Spain's spirit, but he was about to learn a brutal lesson. Ever wonder how a country of ordinary people can bring an empire to its knees? Spain was about to show the world. When the Spanish people realized what Napoleon had done, they didn't just get angry, they got ready for war. But this wasn't going to be any ordinary fight. Napoleon's army was in for a shock. How do you battle an entire nation when every citizen becomes your enemy? The Spanish people didn't have a strong army. They didn't have advanced weapons. What they had was something way more powerful, a burning desire to kick Napoleon out of their country. And they were willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. Farmers dropped their plows and picked up pitchforks. Shopkeepers closed their stores and grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Even priests joined the fight. Suddenly, every hill, every street, every building became a potential battleground. The Spanish started using guerrilla warfare tactics. They'd attack French supply lines, ambush small groups of soldiers, and then disappear into the countryside. The French troops were used to fighting big battles with clear battle lines. But how do you fight an enemy that melts away as soon as you try to face them? Napoleon's soldiers were stuck in a nightmare. They couldn't tell who was a civilian and who was a fighter. Every time they thought they had control of an area, they'd get hit by another surprise attack. It was like trying to put out a fire that kept popping up in new places. But the Spanish weren't fighting alone. Britain, Napoleon's biggest enemy, saw a chance to strike. They sent troops to help the Spanish, led by a general named Arthur Wellesley. You might know him better as the Duke of Wellington, the guy who would later beat Napoleon at Waterloo. With British help, the Spanish resistance got even stronger. Napoleon's army was caught in a trap. They couldn't leave Spain without losing face, but they couldn't win either. Every day they stayed, they got weaker. This war in Spain was draining Napoleon's empire. He needed those troops for other battles, but he couldn't pull them out. It was like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, slowly weakening his whole empire. The Spanish resistance turned into one of the bloodiest guerrilla wars in history. It tied up Napoleon's forces for years, much longer than he ever expected. What he thought would be an easy win was turning into the biggest mistake of his career, and the consequences, they were about to change everything. Napoleon's invincible image was starting to crack. Other countries saw that he could be beaten. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could stand up to him too. Napoleon's betrayal of Spain wasn't just a big mistake, it was the spark that burned down his empire. The Spanish people showed the world that even the strongest army can fall to a determined resistance. Their fight against Napoleon's forces drained his resources and shattered his image of invincibility. It's a lesson that echoes through history. Underestimate your enemies at your own risk. Napoleon thought he could easily control Spain, but instead he got bogged down in a costly years-long conflict. This war in Spain weakened him so much that when he tried to invade Russia, his empire couldn't handle it. So remember, betraying your allies might seem like a smart move in the moment, but it can backfire in ways you never expected. Napoleon learned that the hard way, and it cost him everything. Hey, if you made it this far, you're clearly someone who loves uncovering the hidden truths of history. But here's the thing, most people will never know these stories. Let's change that. Hit that like button so more people can see this video, and subscribe to join the family of history lovers who crave the real stories behind the legends. Don't just watch history, be part of it. Let's grow this community and bring history's biggest secrets to light together. Drop a comment below.